All right, so we'll call the meeting to order at 7:02. Good to see everyone. Um, so meeting minutes, I have been very delinquent. I do have one set, but I have not caught up. So I've been traveling for a bit, but I will catch up. So you guys are going to see a lot over the next 2 weeks. And I might suggest or seek help. Paul, I think you offered to help out at times too. But as we go forward, it'd be great if we could rotate a little bit, just so that I am not so far behind. But Paul, I don't know if you'd be willing to do it tonight, or I could do it tonight. You do it next time, but just it would be great if we can get some rotating through here, if that's okay with everyone.
Sure. Yeah, are we recording?
We are recording,
Does,
and
does,
yep.
does that produce a transcript? No?
No, so we don't have, actually, not to segue, Al, I don't know if there's any update on AI for meeting minutes,
Um,
the select board or anything, because that would be awesome at one point.
um, I think there actually is a way to do it in Zoom. It's not, it's going to be a transcript rather than rather than a set of minutes, but it would certainly be a place to start with. Let me just see something here.
Yep, actually, I just pulled it up, I think.
Oh, all right.
Um, at least, huh, that's weird. Well,
If you can turn it on, we might as well give it a try.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be a big help. I know, I have this Fathom AI note taker thing that's great, but this meeting won't let it join.
yeah, let's
No, I
see.
think there is an AI. Yeah, I think I think you've turned it on, Doug. So
Okay, is it on?
well, I'm seeing a little flashing symbol that seems to say,
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yep. The AI companion is on.
all right.
And Paul, right now it says only the webinar host will get it. But when I get it, because I can't click the other options, I will send it to you.
Okay.
So hopefully that'll be helpful. Okay, excellent. All right, so meeting minutes, nothing for tonight again, but I will get to those. First item is the housing production plan update, which is an updated item for our agenda. So I will turn it over to Ellen to give us an update where we stand on that.
Great, thank you. So we got word from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, where we submitted our housing production plan. They sent us a message the end of September, that they were requesting two what they called minor modifications before issuing the approval letter. So I forwarded over their email, but they were asking for identifying what they're calling specific sites for which the municipality will encouraging the filing of comprehensive permit applications. And so they were asking for clarification as we'd identified some of the potential or in progress comprehensive permit or 40B sites that are currently kind of in the pipeline. So they were looking to understand more kind of where these were in that process, and if there were other sites that the town would be encouraging the filing of 40Bs on. The other kind of clarification or addition they were asking for is that the HPP, they said regulations require the identification of town-owned parcels for which the municipality commits to issue RFPs to develop SHI eligible housing. So both of those were asking for a little more specificity. And I know these are items we'd talked about as we were working with Community Scale to put the plan together. And so our feeling at the time, and I think remained that kind of given the condensed timeline under which we put this together, we were somewhat hesitant to get too specific, that we were able to refer back to the last housing production plan, to the master plan, to identify the types of sites that we thought it would be appropriate to encourage development on, but without a broader community engagement process, like went into developing the last HPP and the master plan, that getting really specific didn't really feel appropriate. So I had that conversation with Community Scale, who were supportive of that, and see if I can share this. They put together an updated page in our plan. Oh, Doug, is it possible to
Yes.
give here? Thank you.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Thanks.
All right, you should be good.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So they sent over basically an updated page. So what was page 28 in the plan that we submitted, which identified the current 40Bs, 120 that's been approved, 250 that's still in the timeline or in the pipeline. Identified those, as well as these kind of potentially underutilized sites along Route 9, and talked a little bit about hiring a consultant to explore these opportunities, make sure there's coordination with wastewater study committee. And so what they proposed replacing the slide 28 with is a new slide 29 that includes the 40B sites, those same pink underutilized sites, potentially underutilized sites, and highlights all of the municipally owned sites around town, and talks more, make this a little bit bigger, in the next steps about encouraging the granting of the 40B permit for 250 Turnpike, and then working with a consultant to explore more opportunities that would then encourage the filing of a 40B permit, and further studying of feasibility of the municipally owned sites. So it's kind of a tightrope that we really want to be responsive to what HLC is asking and what are the requirements of the housing production plan, but also recognizing that we don't want to be calling out any specific sites at this point without a lot more conversation and engagement. So this was the attempt to kind of strike that balance. And yeah, wanted to get everyone's reactions to that. If we want additional modifications, we can talk again with Sarah Brent and with Nels to do that. But this was their first pass at addressing those comments.
It seems like a reasonable response to me. I mean, I think, like you said, we can't say for sure which parcels we're going to want to develop without a much more detailed process that involves a lot more stakeholders. So this seems like a good happy medium to me.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah,
reality is that we have no formal authority in this with respect to making a commitment to develop a site. That really can only be done by town meeting. So I will note that a lot of those sites that are on the map are already heavily restricted.
Yep.
Yeah, in fact, the vast majority of them can't be developed for a couple of different reasons. Either they're completely wet, or they've got conservation easements on them. So, yeah, for example, the town forest, I know we can't develop. Believe me, I looked.
Do you think we should reflect that on this map and
I think
eliminate?
you could certainly put some text in there saying a significant portion of the town-owned parcels are already restricted, but we note them. You conceivably you could do it if you can get special legislation, but that's that's a tall hurdle.
So again, I think it's a good compromise. Ellen, I think if our consultant can identify what already has conservation restrictions and identify them might be helpful.
Yep.
I do think there's already language again, which was what we originally stated was our focus was really within 500 feet of Route 9, right? Um, so I think overlaying the town parcels doesn't change that kind of objective, right? You know, if we're looking for parcels, they're more along the Route 9 corridor. And again, this is only one of multiple strategies we're looking at, right? So for us to be in compliance, with the housing production plan from the state perspective, I think this is a great compromise. And with just the addition of, you know, maybe shows some of the parcels that are conservation, just green, highlight it, outline, but just showing green. And then, and again, I think, as I already said, and Paul said, I mean, it's not like we're specifically targeting any parcels at this point. This is just the beginning of the process. So, but I like the strategy and the approach.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so I can reach out to Sarah Brent and ask to make that update to the map. And I think the email from HLC stated that they see these as minor modifications with no additional local approval required. So, with them knowing the process that a town would have to go through to commit to developing a piece of land, this feels like a reasonable level of commitment that we're making, right? They're not asking us to go back to the select board or planning board or town meeting to, commit any particular parcel. So I think narrowing this down a little bit more, to eliminate ones we know are restricted and talking more about this, like you said, Doug, is one of our strategies, should hopefully address what they're looking for, and then we can move this forward.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And again, if these are really minor clarifications or updates, I think, Alan, you can go back and, work with them to finalize it and let's, submit the minor revisions back to the state so we can close the process out.
Perfect. I can do that. Thank you.
Okay, great. We do have a couple of attendees online, so I would just say to the attendees, we're going to go through a number of topics, so just feel free to raise your hand if there's any kind of topics as we go through them, if you want to comment on them. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll just keep going through the agenda. Next item is the 55 plus housing bylaw update. Again, Alan, I think I'll turn it back over to you. We talked about this last time, but just would be curious as to where the most recent update from your perspective is.
Sure. So, I can't remember when we last talked about it, but the short version is that we are going to be spending more time on this to hopefully bring to annual town meeting in the spring, as opposed to fall town meeting that's rapidly approaching. That we initially went into this with the main goal of removing that cap that is in place on 55 housing development that we're also rapidly approaching. And the more time we spent on it, the clearer it became that there's other language in there that could be clarified and that could be added to make it a better bylaw. So that includes thinking more about the affordability piece that would go in there. There's some pretty vague language in there right now about making sure units are available to a variety of income levels, but no specificity on what that means and who those households are and what those income levels are. And in conversations with the planning board, there's definitely more clarification sought on their side about the affordability piece. And I think what we're trying to figure out is what that affordability restriction can be that doesn't completely prohibit development. So our goal is, of course, affordable housing development. And I think what we're seeing with some of the inclusionary bylaws that have a percentage of affordability or a deep affordability level that doesn't match the economics of that town, the construction economics, that just nothing ends up getting built. So our goal is to spend some more time on this. Westboro has recently put in place an inclusionary housing bylaw, not just for age-restricted housing, but in general. So a plan is to connect. I've spoken with their planning director, but also reach out to some folks on their Affordable Housing Trust to figure out what type of language we can put into this that ensures some affordability, as much affordability as possible, without just prohibiting development, which is what we're trying to replace. So it is a work in progress. I'll say so. Planning board has been working on a lot of the other warrant articles and bylaw changes that are coming before fall town meetings. So we're taking a little bit of a pause, and then Marnie and I will be reconnecting to keep working on this. So we'll continue to bring updates and have this conversation here as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, Ellen, I think it would be, I mean, again, when the time's right, I'd love to, as this board spend, a good chunk of time on this and those parameters,
Yeah.
Independent of the planning board. And then it'd be great to get
Yeah.
together with the planning board, and discuss them as well. I mean, obviously we got fall town meeting first, so I agree, like we have to get that out of the way, or get through that. And then, but I definitely don't want to necessarily wait also to, January, February, right? Because obviously before you know it, spring will be on top of us. But um, again, I think we all know this is a key goal of us, right? To modify this. Just, I think we talked about this before, but my specific thoughts on affordability, it should be at least 10%, right? To stay pace. I just would caution heavily because there's a lot of numbers that were discussed, like 40 or 50%, which doesn't make any economic sense. And so I do think that's the key is not just affordable housing, but also diversity of housing, which is a key goal. And so, I mean, I'd love to have broader discussion just amongst us, but also with, the group. And I think also densities was another topic that was brought up too as well. Um, and so, and I do fear that sometimes we over tinker, right? To the point where, you know, I mean, the previous bylaw definitely worked, right? Because we hit the cap pretty quickly, right? And so just trying to be careful as we go through that. So, but yeah, this is a great update, but at least those are just kind of my quick thoughts, but I'm still excited about this. I also think the need is, obviously it was going to be too rushed to get it on to fall town meeting, but I definitely don't want to miss. And then, again, we talk about like, we're gonna have to get out to, the community too as well to, educate them on this. So I just, we won't have a lot of time. It's gonna disappear pretty quickly. So, but I'll turn it over to Al or Paul if you guys have additional thoughts or comments.
No, yeah, the timeline, realistically, you need to have something in a pretty advanced state of completion by February. The warrant will probably close end of February, no later than the beginning of March.
Yeah, and I would say, to your point too, Doug, that for our next meeting, if you'd like, I can pull together more of what we've been working on and make sure everyone on the committee has that, so we can kind of have more of a discussion during our
Yeah.
next trust meeting about what we'd like to see, and have that kind of in place, and then start up those conversations again with planning.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. That we can really go through each of the topics that are the substantive topics, and then, again, that we have some consensus among us or ranges or bands of consensus, and then, to be able to get that back to Marnie and the planning board and then to have kind of more of a joint meeting, I think that would be great. I do think this is like key item that we can really achieve at next spring town meeting would be great. Okay. Paul, any thoughts or comments on your end?
No, nothing beyond what's already been said.
Okay. All right, next topic. The Atlantic Management proposal for the EMC or the Dell property, I guess now, which again is the I think everyone knows is the potential Costco. I actually put this on, and again, again, we're the Affordable Housing Trust, and again, I think people really think about that as just building affordable housing. But from my perspective, again, I think it's about just making, lowercase housing affordable in general or lower A. And the concept of supporting commercial economic development definitely helps with taxes, right? And so I just simply, again, this is not necessarily where the Affordable Housing Trust needs to weigh in necessarily, but town meeting is coming up, and I think the ability to, support commercial development that would help grow our tax base is not a bad thing, at least personally. I don't know if the AHT wants to take a more formal stance on this, or we just do this more individually, but I was at the planning board when it was brought up and discussed in detail, and think it's definitely a good thing. And our taxes have been pretty surreal high, or growing over time, and that does affect people that are in here for 30 or 40 years and can't afford their taxes. So anyways, I mean, again, it's not maybe specific to our mission necessarily, maybe more tangential, but anyways, just was at least want to bring up, at least in our forum to say, I think it's good that we support commercial development where it makes sense because it helps taxes and helps, improve the commercial tax base, which lowers taxes for residents. So, but that was just my thought of putting on the agenda.
Well, you're preaching to the converted, of course. Yeah, in fact, I'm working on the presentation right now for town meeting. Our taxes are being driven by three factors, really. One is just general inflation, which has run, over the past 10 years has been about 3%, 3.2, 3.4%. We've seen an increase in municipal headcount, which is substantial, certainly faster than we've seen growth in the population. And then finally is the shift in, that's happened. Before COVID, 80% of the town's taxes came from residential properties, and today it's over 84%. And so that has shifted about little over $2 million of property taxes off of commercial properties and onto the residential side. And you're absolutely right. That is putting pressure on longtime residents, particularly those of more limited means or who are living on fixed incomes. And I think that a robust and balanced economic environment is going to be conducive to the town being willing to engage in affordable housing. It also creates employment benefits, employment opportunities.
I agree with all of that. And, I mean, I would also just welcome a Costco. I mean, honestly, we've got about 3 BJs within 15, 20 minutes of my house and no Costco. So, and I can't think of a better place to put it. I mean, it's right on Route 9. It's right in F-195. It's like, yeah, there'll be some more traffic, but it's not really going to bother anybody, I don't think.
Well, we're already a cut through for Framingham and Westboro with all their development on either side of us, right?
Right.
So we got a lot of pass-through traffic and no one's stopping, right? So I do also believe too that Costco, this was one of the points that was made, will, potentially also bring other businesses, right? It kind of creates a cluster. So, you know, um, you know, I don't know. I'm curious if the board would be, sorry, Ellen, I don't know. I'll pause. Sorry if you have thoughts before I jump into a suggestion.
I don't think much to add on top of what's been said, just fully in agreement that, more economic development in town is good for everybody and yeah, helps with the pressures on housing costs and residential taxes. So it's a positive.
So would you guys be willing as a committee to, basically pass a motion stating that we support this, in order to improve, commercial tax base that makes the residential taxes more affordable over time, or to balance it as a statement from this committee. I mean, not pushing it per se, but just trying to bring some weight, into this discourse. I mean, I'm obviously going to be speaking in favor of it just generally as an individual, but just curious if that makes sense or if we feel that's a bit outside our scope.
Uh, I'm in favor, I mean, I don't think it does any harm.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm thinking. It doesn't do any harm. I don't know if it's outside our scope either, but again, it doesn't do any harm, so
Yeah.
it's not illegal, put it that way.
So I might suggest maybe a motion to state that, the Affordable Housing Trust supports, the proposed warrant article as it will, improve the commercial tax base, which will, you know, lessen the impact on the residential tax base, right? Which improves affordability, if that makes something simple as that.
Well, the other thing we can say is, that given that I'm going to be speaking out of both sides of my mouth here for a moment, is that, the principal source of our funding comes from the CPA. And so this would also make CPA housing funds more available. So that's the hook that gives us an interest.
So maybe I will say this out loud, and hopefully AI is recording it or Paul's taking great notes. But I'll need someone to obviously make the motion. But it sounds like the motion is that the Affordable Housing Trust supports the proposed land management warrant article as it improves the commercial tax base, which improves affordability on the residential taxes, and also has the potential to generate additional CPA funds, which supports the Affordable Housing Trust.
So moved.
I have a second? Okay.
Okay.
All in favor? Al?
Aye.
Paul?
All right.
Ellen?
Aye.
And Doug is aye. And I will be at town meeting, so I'm happy to get up on behalf of the trust and just, simply state that. I'll probably do it towards the back per se of commenters, but I do think it's, I do think there seems to be a lot of support, at least people I've talked to. There's a lot of exuberance like Paul had, where it'd be great to have a cost. It'd be great to have like a grocery store, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's a membership-based model, but just hope they can build it fast enough or quick enough. So
I think their timeline is about 2 years.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's just great. I mean, especially because there is no grocery store and, and again, excited for the tax base, but okay, great. Next item on the agenda is the Affordable Housing Trust CPA application. We did get some questions from them. I did circulate that to all members. Ellen was just at the CPC meeting before us. So maybe Ellen, I'll turn it over to you, at least maybe for an initial update, and we can go from there.
Sure. So, like Doug said, the CPC reviewed the applications we received at our last meeting a month ago, and so sent each applicant a list of questions. Ours is pretty short, but so CPC was looking for a little bit more specificity as to kind of both a final cost of a project that we'd be asking for their support for. Also looking for a little more clarity on what's currently in the trust fund account and how much of those funds are from the CPA. And was also looking to have more of a discussion around lowering some of the affordability restrictions and whatever it is that we'd be doing to like a 40 to 60% of AMI. So a couple broad questions and then one kind of really specific piece on affordability. So the CPC was having a more detailed conversation with Recreation tonight about addressing questions on their application. There was also an application from the Historical Commission. I don't know if the commission was planning to be there tonight to address those, but I shared that our plan was to discuss the questions at our meeting now and then attend the next CPC meeting to go through some of the answers and just kind of talk in a little bit more detail. But yeah, I think, you know, Doug had suggested talking through more of this as a group before going back to CPC to really think about how we want to frame this and kind of how it makes sense to proceed.
So I have some thoughts, but again, as chair, I think I'll defer to the other members first to see if anyone has initial comments before I chime in.
So can you clarify, they were asking for more project detail, and yet we don't actually have a project.
Correct.
Correct.
Nor, and it, you know, I think the entire reason for bringing funds on this side of the table is that we can actually react, no, 2 orders of magnitude faster than the CPC can, three orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and so we don't have a specific project. I mean, you know, I think we've been clear with them about the intended uses of the funds. But you know, so I'm not quite sure what it is they're looking for. Do you have a feel?
So my sense is that if there was a specific project that we were aiming to use these funds for, they want to know that. And I think there's an understanding generally that there doesn't have to be a specific project in this ask. I think the request is that if there is one, the group wants to know.
Maybe the way to answer this is to say, you know, in the past year or 18 months, you know, without going into great detail, you know, we have attempted to purchase 1, 2, 3, 4 different parcels, none of which, because they're all of these have been challenging sites, we've not been able to come to agreement. But in fact, we have been trying to deploy these funds. You know, we had an arrangement with one, but that we could perhaps give without going into great detail. We were outbid on one. We were the existing property owner on the next one, you know, wanted to stay in the home for some extended period of time, which just did not line up with our goals. Then another one, we entertained discussions, but in the end, it required a lot of jumping through a lot of regulatory hoops and in fact zoning variances, and we were uncomfortable with that. And the third one, you know, we were not able to have a meeting of the minds. So, you know, there have been 4, we have attempted to buy 4 properties in the last year. And that is, you know, so we have been active, we just have not been successful. You know, buying a house isn't easy, and buying you know, something with where we can get good leverage is even harder. And
So
you know, it's no secret that, you know, we've looked at other sites, and you know, it's public knowledge that we actually, the other one was, we made an offer on the Atwood site to help with the cleanup costs in return for transferring it to us. So we are out trying to do something, and we have had to put our creative hats on, and you know, we have less flexibility even though we can operate faster than the rest of town government, frankly, the CPA constraints still make it somewhat difficult to interact with the commercial market.
Yeah, I would add to that, I think without the funds that the CPA has already given us, we wouldn't have even been in the conversation for any one of those
Correct.
properties, I don't think, so. But with more money, we'd be in more conversations, so.
So first of all, Al, I think Paul, I think, well, one, we owe them an update just generally, I think every 6 months, right? Um, I actually really do like the theme where we can provide an update, again, without getting into details that, first of all, 3 homeowners approached us specifically about purchasing their home, right? Which is good news, right? And we can go into one was too small, right? Just what didn't make much sense, right? Because we don't want to do just a single home, right? Others, we got outbid or it just got complicated. But I think we can also report back, just expanding on the theme, that we have definitely found out this is more expensive than we would have envisioned, right? So we're definitely going to need more funds, right? Type of thing. Um, and then Paul, to your point, transferring the funds to HT has allowed us to actually pursue these things and even be in the mix, right? Which I think is an important theme. I think we can also remind them this is just one part of our overall strategy that we're working on, right? Type of thing. I think we can also provide an update, that as a committee, we've talked more about, senior affordable housing too, as part of this process, more cottage, type development, as an option. We're not looking to just do a single home, right? We're looking, but we also want to be in the appropriate scale. So that might be a good theme. And then maybe the ask is, and Ellen, it was great to hear that a specific project needed to be tied to it. I mean, I think the ask might be is that, and I'm trying to remember, Al, I think you found out, I think it was only 12,000 that was added to the affordable house, but how much do we know was added to the affordable housing bucket? Because I think we left 100 in, correct? Was that the amount that was left in, or was
I
it?
believe so.
Yeah. So what is it? Was it 112 now? Was it only that much? Trying to remember. I can find out, but one of the things that, I mean, the least path of resistance might be simply to state, look, we don't have a current project now. We know it costs more. We know that you guys want to retain something in case somebody shows up, even though obviously they can approach us directly too, right? Not just go through CPC, but it might be at least to sweep the additional amount that's come in, right? Because we know it's going to be more expensive, right? So the request could be more of whatever's above the 100. We'd just like to kind of sweep it into the account. This committee can also ask for more. We can also lower the amount they have retained to 75, but at least I think the path of least resistance might just be, look, it's expensive. No one's ever asked for funds directly to the CPC, but we're willing to keep those funds there. And that could be a way to, at least approach it, at least for this one, right? Because we did apply and we left it kind of vague as to how we were applying, but that could be a good way for us at least, even just get into the habit every year for now to say, we're going to show up every year. We're going to ask for the excess funds, and the reason why we're asking it for so early is that you guys have some very specific time frames, which you guys all spent a lot of time on. So we respect that. But again, that just, that's why it was a hurried approach that we had to submit, but again, I think it's more about maybe a general request to sweep funds above what they think they need to retain. And just because we know we have spent a lot of time in it, we need every dollar to make these projects work. And so maybe that's the approach when we go in.
I think you actually said something quite important, which is the plain fact is that if somebody came to the CPAC and had a CPA compliant project, why wouldn't they come to us, bring it to us? Because we could fund it tomorrow
Yeah.
versus, and frankly, I want to spend this money.
Yeah.
This words you will not hear from me very often. But this money should be spent. And so if somebody's got a CPA compliant project that they'd like to get funded, bring it to us first, because frankly, we're looking to do something.
And I don't disagree. I do think they would be very resistant for if we were to say, hey, give us everything, right? You know, I get we went through that last year. But I do think at least
Yeah.
sweeping the excess funds until we do have a project, right? And then once we do spend a good chunk of it, then maybe we are going back and saying, well, look, you still haven't received the project. So now we're going to come back because now let's say we only have 200,000 left. We're just going to ask for all the funds because we have been effective, right? Because I think the other thing too is they're waiting to see, can we execute on the project too? So that's why I think they're trying to keep some of the money at bay. But I think it's a very reasonable request to say, look, the account increased by 12 or whatever it is, we'd like to sweep that amount at least to us or transfer it because these projects we're going to need every dollar. And, so you can still retain some in the background, but expect to, kind of see us every year. Um, but I think that's fair and reasonable under the guidelines of what we went through with them last year, until we find a project, then it's different. I think once we execute on a project, then I think we might be going back and asking for everything. And Al, to your point, I mean, someone can come to us tomorrow and ask, for a project. They don't have to go through the CPC project, but I think there's definitely a control element here. I think they'd be very hesitant to give everything over, today.
I think the monies should be on the order of $50,000 of
Yeah.
new money.
Yeah.
So that ought to be, and maybe convince them to reduce the
Al,
balance.
who can tell us, Al?
Carla McAuliffe can tell us.
Carla?
Yeah, I can send her a quick note.
Okay. So if it makes sense, then maybe, so Ellen will already be there, but I can attend the next CPC meeting. And if you guys are okay with it, I mean, obviously we can, more than two of us can attend. Just let me know. I can always post just in case. So I will do that. But I think that would be I'll put some, speaking points together along this line, but I think that would be the update. So we'll provide an update to the next meeting. And I think if you guys are okay with it, I think we would, basically clarify that or state that we'll update the application to seek the excess funds above the 100,000.
Makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yep, that sounds good to me.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, next item, so Al, I'll turn this over to you, but discussion of potential financing approaches, and Al, I think you did some great legwork in terms of following up, both with the town as well as a lender. Do you want to provide an update just on that? And I do think at some
Sure.
point we may want to meet with them, but I think it'd be great to get an update.
So I did, one of the powers that we have is the ability to borrow money, amazingly enough. And so I went over to Main Street Bank with Brian Ballantyne, our treasurer, and just met with one of their principals to discuss, if we were to borrow money, and the context was we thought that perhaps we had an opportunity to flip a house and split a lot so that we could then get a lot that we could develop for affordable housing at the same time that we would then return the original house back onto the private market. And the only way we could do that would be to borrow the funds. And we have the ability to do that. What the bank is mostly interested in is if, we're going to take out, a 6-month loan, that we have enough unencumbered funds, which would be non-CPA funds, to cover the interest for the period. And we do in fact have enough of that non-CPA funds. The interest that we get on the balances is currently classified as non-CPA funds, so that I call them unrestricted funds. We're dealing with the banks, so that if we were to actually do this, there's a fair amount of paperwork, and probably 3 to 4 weeks between the time you submit the paperwork and you actually get cash. But it's not crazy you know, under the right circumstances, if we needed a short-term loan to facilitate a project, I think that is something we could do. And you know, it wouldn't be the easiest thing in the world. There'd be a lot of bureaucracy, but I think we could get the town financial team to help us out.
And Al, one thing I think, because this goes back to, and again, this is probably not this year or next year, but longer term strategy. I mean, one of our impediments is that there's not an automatic transfer from CPC to the Affordable Housing Trust, right?
Right.
Because in theory, right now, we have a fixed amount of capital that sits in the account, right? So it's great to hear that, we could probably support a short-term loan because we have enough capital in the account, right, to make payments. But we really need a dedicated revenue stream, right? Where it would almost have to be an automatic transfer. So again, if we were getting 50,000 per year from, CPA funds, right? And those were transferred automatically, that would be a revenue source for us to fund a bigger loan. But I'm just saying that's more for future reference,
Yeah.
not necessarily for now, but
It's unclear to me whether we can use CPA funds for that purpose. I rather suspect we can't.
okay.
On the other hand, sometimes developers will make contributions in lieu of building an affordable unit. And I think what would be highly desirable is ultimately for us to have a fund of unencumbered fund or of unrestricted funds. The CPA, what we learned in the last attempt to buy a property is that there are quite a few constraints on the use of CPA funds in terms of, creative finance. It's very, it's very constrained, and for better and worse. But you can't, the transaction we were anticipating, which was to buy a property and potentially flip it so that we could get other parts of the property, is not something you can do with CPA funds. So
Okay.
but the good news is, yeah, I didn't get thrown out of the banker's office. I think they do business with us. We're part of the town of Southborough. This town of Southborough does business with Main Street Bank, so they're going to, and I think we can get some help from the finance team if we actually have to apply for a loan.
No, that's great. Again, I think as part of our exploring all options, I really appreciate you doing that. And it was really some definitive feedback, from Main Street Bank, which was great too. So I don't have any other questions at this point, but great to know. All right, next topic, new member discussion. So I think as we all know, Jesse Stein is stepping away from the board. I do think there are two interested candidates, and Al, I've not been able to catch up. I think it's Isabel Murphy yet. That's been on me. And so I'm actually going to try to give her a call tomorrow. But Al, if you talk to her, we probably should encourage her to apply.
I
And then,
did. I
okay,
said,
good.
I told her,
Perfect.
you got to fill out the application.
Okay. And then Paul, I think you have another potential candidate who I think might be great as well too. But I don't know if you want to provide an update there.
Yeah, he's David Joyner, and he's been working in affordable housing from the financial end for, I think, about 30 years. He's currently with Bank of America, and I'm stretching my ability to articulate this accurately, but it's something to do with, he controls this like some money that people. The best way I can explain it is, how carbon offsets work, like people buy. I think there's a similar thing in affordable housing, and he controls some funds that have to do with that. And anyway, and that's what he's doing currently, but he's been involved in various aspects for a long time. So I've been having back and forth with him, and he's interested. Right now, he has to go through a compliance check with the bank, with his employer, to make sure his taking this position doesn't cause any problems on their end. So he expects to hear, I think, as soon as tomorrow on that, and if they give him the green light, then he's gonna apply as well, so. But I think he'd be great. I mean, to me, he's got that financial lens that I think we're somewhat lacking, you know, at least I know I am.
Somebody
So
who's
he's-
a banker is not a bad thing.
Yeah. No, I'm thrilled between him and Ellen. That would be awesome, right? I think Ellen is the closest to this world. But I definitely think somebody with affordable housing development experience or living in the finance side is just, I think that's great. So I'm excited. So Al, how does, more out of curiosity, because obviously the select board appoint, right?
Yes,
Um, does this committee do anything? I mean, do we get involved in the selection
we
process or
can
we just
certainly
live?
recommend.
Okay,
In fact, that is more often than not the tradition. It's,
okay.
that the committee will recommend somebody.
And then Al, when they get applications, will someone send them to us, right? Because obviously I think we've had conversations with two folks. I
I
mean,
don't
is that
know is the answer, but I can find out.
okay? Yeah, because I think that'd also be great too, because then I think I can keep this on the agenda, but if we do get two resumes, right, then I think it allows at least the committee to review them. We can probably also go into executive session to discuss them, right? If we want, and then if we decide we want to make a recommendation, great, but that might be something we could do too as well. Okay. So I think those are the key topics. I do have just the open discussion of potential strategies for affordable housing and discussion of potential parcels for acquisition. I don't think there's anything specific on either of those from my perspective, but I'll pause to see if anybody wants to bring up any topics under those two general categories. And then I do think we might want to just jump into executive session more for a debrief. But before that, I would say anything on those two bullet points.
The one
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I think I mentioned this before, the parcel behind St. Anne's Church that the church owns. I did send a note to Father Albert, the pastor there. He says they have plans for it, and I kind of left it there, but I don't know. I think it might be worth going back to him because that's been vacant for a very long time.
Paul,
So,
as you mentioned that, I think, and Ellen, you might be aware of this too, but I think there is some potential pending legislation at the State House or discussions about um, church land, right? Churches can actually potentially build affordable housing, and again, it feels like an MBTA Communities Act thing a little bit, or like it's like kind of like bypasses local zoning, I think a little bit, but I don't know. But there's something percolating. But Ellen, I don't know if you've heard anything more about that, but I'm scratching the surface, but I know there's been some discussion.
Yeah, so it has, I won't share my opinion on the acronym, but it's called the Yigby bill. So it's yes in God's backyard. And so is yeah, as you said, currently in the legislature. It's unclear the timeline in which it's progressing, but like you said, to encourage yeah, churches, other houses of worship that are oftentimes, sitting on a lot of land to either develop that themselves with a little bit of relief from local restrictions or to donate that land to someone else who can develop it. So I don't know that I wouldn't say it's imminent. I think it's like, yeah, working its way through committees. But this is something that, yeah, the state is interested in encouraging. So I think, like you said, if there's an opportunity to keep that conversation going, then there might be, yeah, some benefit to both sides of forming a partnership at some point.
Yeah, I think it's just good for the community to know that it's out there. I don't have any opinion on it at this point, and not that we would, it's at the legislator, but more just, I think Governor Healy and the Lieutenant Governor continue to look for ways to encourage housing development. And Ellen said it much more succinctly and appropriately and correctly than I would have ever been able to.
I try.
Okay.
Yeah, just one other quick piece, on the kind of strategy side is that I think we've talked a little bit before about technical assistance options. And so I spoke more with one of my colleagues who runs a lot of the municipal technical assistance at MHP. And they bring on every year 3 to 5 communities for kind of an intensive, specific to affordable housing trust technical assistance program. So she said that the applications for that typically open up in November. And there's also kind of a general technical assistance program. If we had some kind of specific questions or pieces that we wanted to engage someone on, but just as we're kind of thinking more about, how do we implement these strategies that we've talked about in the housing production plan? How do we kind of take some of the next steps? I think that might be a good resource.
So I'm a huge advocate, whether it's, going into that more specialized program or trying to apply for funds to get some part-time help, I'm a huge fan because obviously, we're all doing this on the side. So, definitely would be helpful from my perspective. So, um, and I don't know, Al, if you think we could get someone to help us with the application. Obviously, I think we could probably,
Yeah,
mosey it along
I
ourselves, but
I
yeah.
think we can get somebody from the administrator's office to help us with doing the application.
Yeah, so I can find out more details on what the application involves and timelines and things and keep everyone updated if that sounds good.
That sounds awesome.
Great.
Okay. Any other topics before executive session? All right, so I will read this. So, the board will be entering into executive session per MGL chapter 38, section 21, and not returning to open session to discuss potential property acquisition, exemption 6. As the chair has determined, that an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the town's position. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Sorry.
Paul, you got a second?
Second.
Okay, all right, all in favor, Al,
Aye.
Paul,
I,
Ellen,
Aye.
and Doug is aye. All right, so let me lock the seminar.
Before we do this, we just ought to ask the participants if they have any questions. Just
They all dropped off.
okay, all right.
Nice
But
thought.
Al,
Though.
thank you.